From when I was about 11 to 14 years old, I had a best friend named Spencer. Spencer had a decent-sized family and a big house. We hung out practically non-stop outside of school. He was homeschooled and I was at public school. During the summers, I practically lived at their house. Spencer had an older brother named Keenan. Keenan was about 5 years older than him, and I thought he hung the moon. He was so cool. He listened to great music and played guitar, and I always wanted to be around him. One summer, when I was 13, Keenan went to summer camp. He was supposed to visit the Grand Canyon and go kayaking and do a bunch of fun stuff. We were jealous. It was weird not having him around all the time, since I basically stayed at their house the entire time. Finally, the day came where Spencer's dad was supposed to go to the airport to pick Keenan up. We were super stoked to hear all about camp. His dad drove up and we ran downstairs to greet them, and yet we didn't see Keenan. His dad had tears running down his face as he exclaimed, "He didn't make it. He didn't make it, you guys." My heart dropped into my stomach and I started to panic. Keenan walked right up behind him and they both started laughing. It was a huge dick move. Anyways, we helped him unload his luggage and stayed up till midnight talking about his summer. He had so much to say. He said he had the time of his life and told us all about how he almost went overboard while whitewater rafting and how he surely would have died if he did. As two 13-year-old boys, we were enamored by Keenan and everything he did. We talked about how Spencer and I were going to go to the summer camp once we turned 18. It had been a long day, and it was time for us all to go to bed. Keenan told us that he would tell us more in the morning when he woke up. I had fallen asleep and woken up in a cold sweat because of a nightmare I had had. In my dream, Spencer and I had went about our entire day just as we had before, except when their dad showed up and joked about Keenan dying on his trip. He actually did die. This was practically my idol, and the dream was so vivid. I needed to go and get some water just to calm myself down afterwards. I checked my phone before I headed to the kitchen, and it was 3:30 a.m. The house was so dark, and I had to tiptoe to be quiet and make sure not to wake anyone. As I walked through the den on my way to the kitchen, I see the moonlight spilling into the living room, the only light in the house. I see what I think is a large silhouette, and as I get closer and my eyes adjust, I see Keenan hanging from the ceiling fan. I freak out and run across the room in a dead sprint to turn on the light to see if my eyes were deceiving me. It was him, except he was asleep and standing in the middle of the room underneath the fan with one of his arms raised straight up and over his head. I never knew Keenan to sleepwalk before, and luckily he had snapped out of it before I tried to wake him up. He looked at me super confused, looked around the room, noticed where he was, and said, "Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you guys. I guess I developed a bit of a sleepwalking habit at camp."
A few years back, when I was 17 years old, I went to a party. Everything was alright until the host started getting really intense and creepy. By that point, it was around 3 a.m. and I was pretty drunk. I decided to call an Uber in order to avoid any advances from the insistent guy. The Uber shows up and I try to sober up when I get in. The driver starts making small talk with me, and in the state I was in, I failed to see the red flags. He starts to ask me about the party I was at, and I told him about the creep, and then he told me it was because I was short and cute. He then asked my age, and sensing a weird vibe from him, I told him I was a minor, thinking that would deter any further advances. But it turns out, that was a horrible idea. He was driving pretty recklessly on the highway, and I snapped out of my drunken stupor real fast. He then asked me to go get drinks with him that same night, and told me he really liked me. I quickly told him I'd get grounded if I stayed out any later, and that my mother was awake and waiting for me at home. Keep in mind, I lived in Mexico, and the amount of people, and especially women, that get murdered daily is ridiculously high. When we got to my home address, I noticed the doors were locked, and he kept on insisting on us going to get a drink even though by now it was almost 4 a.m. I tried to act as nice as possible. Then I told him I couldn't that night. He then asked for my phone number, and he told me we can go out the next day. So, not being the first time that some creep had asked me for my number, I gave him my number, but changed the last digit, so he couldn't actually contact me. But then, he actually dialed the phone as I was getting out of the car. Of course my phone didn't ring, and he started getting agitated and said I gave him the wrong number. I played drunk and stupid and recited my number again, but actually said it correctly in order for him to think he heard the last number wrong. He chuckled and said it was his bad, and told me we'd see each other the next day. I made my way into my house and immediately woke up my mom because I was terrified. She managed to calm me down and told me to go to sleep. So I went into my bedroom and started putting on my pajamas when I heard my phone ringing. The Uber driver was trying to video call me, and I lost my shit when I saw that on my screen. I immediately denied the call and then noticed he'd sent me about 15 messages asking what time he could pick me up and why I wasn't replying. Of course, I blocked him right away and thought that would be the end of it. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number and checked the picture and saw it was the driver. He asked me why I'd blocked him and started spamming me. I immediately blocked him. Over the course of the next month, I'd get messages from random phone numbers, and it quickly became obvious that it was the driver. I would always block him, but eventually, I reported him on the Uber app and changed my number. Only problem is, he knows where I live.
I'm currently a sophomore in college, and the bar scene here is pretty big. Going out at night to get special deals on alcohol so you can get plastered with your friends is kind of a go-to here. Despite this, I'm not a huge drinker, and I don't enjoy it a lot because it tastes so bad and it hurts my stomach. I do enjoy the company though, and often just go out to be with my friends or meet new people. A lot of the times, I'm called the dad of the group because I end up taking care of them all the time. That's the prelude of what happened when I decided to go out with them one Friday night. So we all got dressed up, pre-gaming a bit at my friend Q's apartment before we Ubered downtown to one of our pretty well-known college bars/clubs. After we got in, my friends immediately split off into tiny groups, combing over the club for girls they wanted to try their shot at spending the night with. This is going to make me sound weird, but one-night stands aren't really my thing, and I don't want to end up cock-blocking my friends. So instead of looking for girls, I usually find someone at the bar and make friends with them. I was chatting with some dude that was wearing a cowboy hat when eventually a girl approached me. She was pretty cute, probably 5'6", with dirty blonde hair and eyes that I think were light brown, but they were so light they almost looked gold which threw me off a bit. She asked if she could buy me some drinks in exchange for being her friend for the night, and of course I accepted, because hey, that's why I came here. Anyways, she kept her word and we started talking to each other, and she introduced herself as Alexia, but to call her Alex. I asked her some basic stuff about if she came with friends, if she went to college here, etc., to which all the answers were no. That struck me as pretty odd, as it's honestly pretty unsafe to be in the downtown area alone as a girl at like 1 in the morning. She said she wanted to hear about me though, and she actually seemed pretty excited to listen. It felt like a really nice change of pace, because I'm usually the one learning about other people, not the other way around. It also could have been the alcohol starting to take effect, since I'm actually a pretty big lightweight. As like I said, I don't actually binge drink often. The whole time I was talking, she stared into my eyes and had this warm smile that made me feel so acknowledged, if that even makes sense. It felt like she was enjoying her time as much as I was, and that just made me even happier, because I thought it meant I made a new friend. That was when her demeanor began to change. She started to get kind of flirty and eventually asked if I wanted to go home with her. Like I said, I'm not really a one-night stand type of guy, and I explained I like to get to know people a little better before sleeping with them. I'm pretty sure I saw what I think was anger flash across her face, but it was quickly replaced with another smile as she suggested just going home and watching a movie instead. I agreed and pulled out my phone to begin ordering an Uber, but she basically grabbed my wrist and started guiding me outside. I was confused, trying to ask if she was planning on driving after drinking, but she wouldn't really answer me. We eventually got outside of the club, and she pointed to a black Honda Civic parked right in front of the club. That was when all the warning bells rang like a tornado had passed through them. I was pretty drunk at this point in the night, maybe 6 or 7 drinks deep, but I was still aware enough to see the red flags. She said she had come alone, but the lane the car was parked in was only for pickups, and I never saw her order an Uber. Somebody would have had to have been driving the car. This was enough to make me uncomfortable, and I asked again if she was planning to drive the car. She said yes as she continued walking me closer to it. I knew that was a bald-faced lie, and as we got closer, my heart sank as I noticed the outline of 3 other guys in the car. At that point, my adrenaline kicked in, and I yanked my hand away from her and said there's no way in hell I'm getting in that car with her. She tried begging me one more time, saying she really wanted to have sex and would let me do whatever I wanted, but I already had turned around to walk back to the club. She started cussing me out, practically screaming at the top of her lungs as I walked back up to the bouncers to go in. I texted my friends what happened, and we all met back up and went home. It was obvious. She was going to college bars, trying to get guys drunk before offering to sleep with them so she could get them in a car with 3 other men to try to rob them or do God knows what else. I called my city's anonymous tip line and left a detailed description of the girl, car, and place where it happened. That night was a real wake-up call for me, and I am so thankful that despite being drunk, I was able to piece together what was happening before it was too late. Please, remember to always be safe when going out with friends, especially when it's late at night or if alcohol is involved. But to Alexia, who I saw that night at the bar, let's not meet.